Today I'm talking to Daen Simmat, CEO of Black Lab Design, a local end-to-end design and manufacturing company that prides itself on creating cost-effective local manufacturing solutions for the Australian manufacturing industry. Daen is passionate about showcasing the capabilities of the Australian manufacturing industry and leading a movement of local manufacturing for local economies, a critical step towards reducing our reliance on global supply chains and becoming more circular. Daen, welcome to the Circulist Quest podcast. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
It's a different experience here. We're sort of doing it first time face to face, even during sort of a lockdown. It's coming out of the lockdown recently here in Sydney, which is great. We're about to hit 95% as well in terms of doses. I think we'll be world leading in that sense soon. So I've been sort of watching some of the stuff you guys have been doing online, and I've been quite sort of impressed with how you guys have been operating. I've been learning your story through the power of video and storytelling, and sort of covering off what you guys are focusing on. And you're a local Northern Beaches boy as well, and haven't left the place since birth. Tell us a bit about yourself, Daen. Who is Daen?
Who is Daen? I'm a designer at heart. That's where it all started for me. Pulling stuff apart, putting it back together. Wanting to learn more. That led me into studying industrial design at university. The concept of product design and bringing ideas and concepts and solutions to problems to life, to like tangible things that you actually hold and feel and experience on a day-to-day basis, and what that basically looked like. So started out my life as a CAD jockey with a laptop, designing things for other people in industry. Trying to learn how to design better, design products for, that worked with Australian manufacturing, because we can do it here. But that was hard, as a junior or a young designer coming into the industry, to actually get inside someone else's manufacturing, someone else's manufacturing facility, and getting them to tell you what's difficult. So that you can stay away from it. Yeah. They didn't like exposing those vulnerabilities to themselves. So ultimately, that led to, how do we go and learn about this ourselves? Okay, and
was this a repeated thing that you found here locally?
Yeah, a couple of things that I found locally is we have a bit of a Australian culture of saying that stuff's hard, to try and make it more valuable what we're doing, as opposed to the concepts of saying that it's really easy. Everybody should get involved. Competition and activity breeds more volume of work. The problem that we have in Australia is the concept of an underdog, and putting that over there, and it being really hard for everybody to do, and it always being a problem, and everybody always being busy, and it's 3 o'clock and I'm really tired in an afternoon. They're the flaws that I see in manufacturing in Australia. Everybody telling you why it can't be done, as opposed to telling you what needs to change so that we can do it. And for me, that's about people just having a go at it and going and trying to solve each and every one of those problems one at a time.
Yep.
So Black Lab, the conception of Black Lab was around us not being able to get into other people's factories, so let's create one of our own. The reason why we chose sheet metal was that it was a form of doing rapidly deployed physical, infrastructure that was not reliant on custom tooling. So the lead time to delivery was a lot faster. We could create very creative origami shapes out of metal very quickly. So that's where the journey started. And when we started the business, it was about diversification across different industries, how we were kind of support different sectors, so that we weren't kind of held to task in anyone. If we saw any impact happen to a particular industry, it wouldn't necessarily affect us.
It's an amazing learning to actually understand in your first venture. Pretty much many organisations, very young entrepreneurs, sort of have to learn that lesson 2 or 3 times over before they get it, the diversification strategy, which is good.
The problem is our business had a very, very good synergy with retail. It had a very good synergy with the reactive nature of a marketing and a sales team and fast-moving consumer goods. So it lended itself to grow in that area much faster than we could grow in any of the other areas of the business. So it's ultimately meant that our business does heavily rely on those industries. Now, that's kind of got us to where we have got to today from, constantly trying to solve problems. The business has grown. The equipment that we have acquired has been from not suppliers letting us down, but suppliers not being able to respond fast enough to our demands. And the type of work that we do, it's hurry up and wait. So we get a project, we need to rapidly deploy it. We understand that we just can't take over someone else's factory for 4 weeks and then leave them in the lurch again. But that's what we do time and time again. So we bring that equipment in-house, we have it here, it'll sit idle some days, it won't be doing anything. We constantly run a battle ourselves of, do we look for the reliable work, the cash cow that just churns through the machines, or do we leave our capabilities open for being able to really, excel and deploy with no speed bumps in the way to solve someone's project when that project actually comes to us. And that's what's taken us out of sheet metal and into a final finished product, timbers, plastics, metal, electronics, you name it. If you have a problem and you want to have a go at solving it, come and have a conversation with us.
Yeah. I mean, before we actually started this podcast now, gave us a bit of a tour of the whole place here up in French's Forest, and I was just impressed to see what you got going here. You got some great, happy employees. I get that you're building a great culture here, which is great to see in this local market. And some of the infrastructure that you have here, some of the equipment and machinery is sort of world class from what I can tell. And what's it been like actually trying to, one of the things that I've read about you is that, some quotes from previous conversations have been, there are no secrets with customers, right, was mentioned. Challenge their ideas, right? It's all about challenging their ideas, because there's a big challenge we have locally from that point of view as a net importer, right? And the other part of it is, educate them on the journey, which I think, in how you operate, my first glance experience of what Black Lab Design actually, how it operates, is very much around transparency and engagement and bringing organisations through to actually learn on the journey and to build confidence in sort of what can be done here and ultimately become an exemplar in what can be done here locally. So, back in the day, even the norm, I would say, be organisations would sort of want to get a new product designed and take it to market, and they get it to a point where they design it through the digital screen. And then we typically would send up into Asia, right, without naming the country, and expect something to come back a week or two. And they've gone faster and better and cheaper with doing that now, but it's still not as agile as it could be from my point of view, at least from a high level perspective. Take us a bit onto that and your culture and your values here at Black Lab.
So culture's massive for me. It's why do we do it at all? Yeah. Okay. Everybody that works here has a family. Families come first. Yeah. I've never said no to leave. I've never, had a go at someone for being sick. I've never had a go at anybody for looking after their family first, because, that is ultimately why we go to work every day. Why we have income. It's about living a better life. Mm-hmm. That is massive in this organisation, and I try and play that out. I try and make it as comfortable for people. We talk about COVID. There is some things in COVID that have just happened at the moment that, like a lot of organisations, looked at the survival of the business being one of the most important things. We questioned how do we keep everybody, or we make the survival of everybody who is the business through COVID. Yep. We can go into more depth in that in a little bit, but definitely that culture for us is really important. Having fun, having a laugh, being in a stressful environment that we are in constantly, it's the only way that we can break it up. Everybody needs to enjoy what they're doing. And everybody is different. Everybody needs different things out of the business. Some people need to feel recognised. People need to be, rewarded for their actions. Some people just need time to understand, clarity. Again, no secrets. That's a big thing that I find with staff, and that generates trust with our staff. That then leads across to the trust conversation you said with customers. What we're actually trying to do, or no secrets again. There's nothing to hide. Like everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows when you're trying to drag something out for the wrong reasons. Everybody knows that we have a business that we're trying to run here, and there's compromises, sacrifices, everything that happens along the line. There's no need to sugarcoat it. Tell it how it is. Tell people what's actually going on. Have the difficult conversation early rather than later, and educate the client about why the problem occurred. And then the other side of it is have the client's best interest at heart when you approach it in the first place. If you have that client's best interest at heart and you're actually trying to help them execute and implement what they're trying to do, then it's easy to have that conversation with no secrets. You're not trying to hide something. You're not trying to gouge them. You're not trying to take advantage of them. You're just trying to get on and do what you need to do.
As collaborative partners coming in to achieve the same outcome, right? Yeah. If not better from a black lab.
Yes, and that's, that is the most important thing that I can say. What I can say is hard is we've had to follow, sometimes what I call a Noah's Ark principle. The hardest thing to do in Australia is to grow a capital intensive business. Because capital is hard to find. Financing, it's to go to a bank and have a conversation about what it looks like with proof, to go and have a conversation with an angel investor about where does the risk actually lie versus the the reward of actually what we're creating. It's difficult. We in creating Black Lab, we've had to go and buy extremely expensive assets in a reactive business on a potential opportunity where we work in 6-week cycles and it takes us 120 days to land a new piece of equipment. So you're trying to predict 4 cycles out about what your potential need's going to be. So a lot of the equipment that we've actually got on the floor has not necessarily been our ideal piece of equipment. What we've needed to do is take what's available and figure out how to utilise it inside our business. So we've taken a lot of stock machines off the floor and modified designs around what's been available for us actually to deploy. If we get a whisper of a conversation of something potentially happening in the future, we take gambles on buying tooling or buying equipment or those sorts of things that we know has lead times so that we can be ready for when the customer actually needs to deploy. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Sometimes that sits there and we figure out how to use it on the next one.
Interesting.
But yeah,
it's really interesting to hear. I mean, you guys are making some strategic bets. I think I even look at it from a point of bringing sovereignty back to manufacturing and sort of design here in Australia again, right? Because we've lost our way from my point of view because of other reasons. It's just great to see you guys actually take that step and actually take those strategic bets, which actually means real capital, not just ideas, but execution, and be agile enough to be able to work out how can we sort of connect the dots here to sort of create value in market. So how does that I gather that's what's happening in the business at an executive level. Then there's the other side of the equation, which is actually getting the market to understand the capability and value you can deliver above and beyond being an industrial design firm or mechatronics firm, right? I mean, that's for me, when I look at the business and I look at what you guys are doing, it's like that missing gap right now to get the market to understand what you're working on and delivering its core differentiated value is the challenge, I would think.
It kind of is and it isn't. Okay. One of the things is that what we actually do is we solve problems for people. The people that have the problems don't know what the solutions are to those problems in the first place. And we've got to be careful that we don't go too technical, okay? When someone has a sanitizer dispensing problem, They don't need to know about how we're going to laser cut something out of a particular thickness of sheet, and then what we're going to do for powder coating, and how we're going to mount the dispenser on a stand and those sorts of things. The problem that we're trying to help them solve is that they want customers to have confidence in their shops, because they know that the majority of the people entering them have been sanitizing and disinfecting their hands on entry. Yes. So once you actually draw away from the fact that we've got a manufacturing facility that helps us solve problems, and start looking at how we are listening out for what the problem is that the customer's trying to solve, it changes the thought process about what you want to show someone as far as a capability, to really communicating with people out in industry. It's like, we're here to help. Come and talk to us when you're in trouble. Doesn't matter what the trouble is. Yeah. If we can't help you, we've been in industry for a long time. We can probably point you in the direction of someone who can. Yeah. And because we really care about, the customer actually having the problem solved, because if we solve the problem for them, they'll come back to us with the next problem, and that one might be in alignment with what we need to do as a business, mm-hmm. and that helps us go through that journey. Yeah. That is a big problem in Australia that we have, is trying to overthink what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm with you, 100%. So why don't we just go into thinking about COVID? Oh shit moment, right? Was it around about February, March 2019 when we started to get quite serious about it? What was that moment like, and how did you change or shift from a client demand point of view, and take us on a bit of a journey and a practical example of a journey without having to name companies? It's up to you. How did you guys adapt and actually execute?
So for us, COVID hit. We kind of set up a bit of a war room. Yeah. We walked into that room and looked at the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. Okay, and said, not look at who we've got as a customer base yet, but what is the general population's need going to be? And we went down all the way to the bottom of this, which is the fact that people need to eat. Yep. Do we have customers that are helping people eat? Yes. And we were like, okay, how do we lean into helping that customer continue to support their customers, making their customers feel comfortable in the environment? What does that look like? How can we help on that journey? Again, we have a massive facility that's here, but it's about helping our customers service their customers. Yep. So that was how it happened for us. And then came the phone calls, then came the education, the mass information gathering about who and how and what and where, and other suppliers in industry. How can we work together? What we can do. Then the reactivity came into it. When everybody was going indoors, I was doing hundreds of kilometres visiting different stores, trying to solve problems about
practically in the store.
Being in there. I didn't want to put my staff at risk, so my staff weren't going into the environments. I was going into hotspots about where there was significant problems, and there was a couple of issues. There was staff in the stores not wanting to go and work because of the exposure, but the stores needed to stay open. There was customers having to go through an education journey about how you would interact around social distancing screens. What was the practice around masks and sanitizers, and what this looked like. And it was interesting when it sort of started to take off, and we were doing this work, and then we were starting to deploy, and then we had to ask the questions. How do you keep sanitizer in a sanitizer? How do you know when the batteries aren't working? Going through the problem diagnostics. This turned into creating video help guides about how you kind of worked with it, because we were getting thousands of questions, and the common answer stuff that you would have never thought about was coming into us as a business. So, that was interesting. Then came supply chain problems. You know, where do you buy plastic from? Some social distancing screens. Where do you get the sanitizer dispensers from? You know, this is stuff that we're not making necessarily in the country. So how do we get them here? How do we get them here quick? That was an amazing and reflecting on what happened in a very, very short period of time for our business and what we needed to do and how we behaved around it was very interesting.
I'm sure it's a great learning and capability. You built a new strength and capability in the organisation, I would say. Not knowing what you were doing in the past, but to be able to move so fast and act a bit like, as you said, like a war room or a mission control centre.
Yeah, I think...
Unless that was in your DNA already, I mean...
Yeah, I think that one of the benefits we had is it was in our DNA.
Yeah.
You know, we've to be a manufacturer that's growing in Australia, you know, we couldn't compete on price. So we had to compete on something else. So we competed on time.
Yeah.
Okay. And in competing in time meant that we were set up as an agile business that could pivot into making whatever you wanted us to make in a really short period of time. So we were already sitting in that space, kind of ready to launch.
It's amazing. So it's interesting. You've come out of sort of metal fabrication, and then sort of I just look at I look at the organic sort of change and shaping of your business, and it's gone from sort of simple fundamental metal shaping to creating sort of products to then adding another layer of intelligence to that with intelligent technologies, incorporating them with the digital screens, and you're starting to add levels of complexity when it comes to design work and so forth. So it's just great to see you on the journey, and I look forward and say, where are you going to be in 10 to 20 years time, right? It's just great to see from a point of the Australian manufacturing landscape, just recognising some of the stats locally, close to 93%, I think, of manufacturing, inverted commas, manufacturers in Australia, relatively small cottage players, I'd call them, with 10 to 20 people in them, doing really, I would say from my perspective, relatively mundane type of manufacturing work, so to speak. But you really seem to sort of come out of that, and you're now at a point where you've got close to 100, or if not more, 100 employees, and growing and thinking about next steps. You've gone out of that bracket. In our economy here in Australia, it's pretty much in all verticals and industries, we've got an oligopoly of players. Mostly manufacturing pretty much overseas with subsidiaries here, so to speak. How do you see yourself? I really believe you guys are pioneering a new wave of what we've been calling in the press sovereignty back into the country. You're really testing the boundaries around capability building, and we obviously have the SMILE framework that we're aware of, where we haven't been doing too much on pre-prod and post-production work, and we're starting to do more of that. And especially when I say we, I mean yourselves, by execution. How do you see the local market, local ecosystem, where we're to pull a Paul Keating comment from 20 years ago, we're at the arse end of the world, right? Which actually creates major supply chain issues because we're not part of the Northern Hemisphere anyway. How do you seem to have reacted and actually been proactive in trying to drive capability building in Australia?
Yeah, I think that the thing for me is it's I don't talk about manufacturing in Australia. I talk about manufacturing local to where we consume.
Right.
Okay.
Local
so
for local.
So it's local for local. And it's local for local everywhere.
Yes.
The idea of like sharing design, sharing philosophy. One of the strengths that I've always said that we can do in manufacturing in Australia is if we're making something for Australians in Australia, we understand the culture of the consumer. Okay. One of the problems that I see where we have quality issues that come in from international procurement, it's because where or how that product was purchased, the person didn't understand the culture of the person that was at the thing that was actually consuming the goods. The sad thing about manufacturing in Australia is the capital expense. I'm 8 years now in Black Lab. I got to the 5-year point of the journey where I needed to go through the capital expenditure again. We had to start that process. That was right at the beginning of COVID.
Wow.
How do we ride it out? We were moving into more intelligent products and making less of it. We had to move very quickly into the fact that people weren't talking to us about intelligent products. They were talking about, smart design, but of very dumb things, and lots of it.
Yeah.
So we needed to be able to pivot into that quite quickly, and that came capital expense. We just haven't spent the capital on the equipment in the country to continue to compete with the rest of the world. So if someone went tomorrow, everything's going to have to be made in Australia, we actually can't support ourselves at the moment. And it's not from a labour force perspective, like the people are there to do the work. We just don't have the capital equipment to do it. And to get the capital equipment, we don't have the facility to build the capital equipment here ourselves. If I'm talking sheet metal fabrication, we don't have companies in Australia making metalworking equipment here in Australia.
Like the ones that you showed me in your factory floor.
So that's coming out of Europe and Japan, and there's more of that equipment coming out of Asia. Like that's a big problem for us. So we need to slowly start, giving little bits back to Australia. Not turn the tap right on, just start to dribble it back in, so that companies can with confidence not feel like they're gambling on going out and spending a lot of money on a piece of capital and then trying to figure out how they pay it off, or how they go through that journey. And setting up good relationships mean where everybody understands it's a bit of a journey, because not everybody is going to have the appetite for risk that I have, that's meant that I've taken the leap of faith and gone, we'll get there in the end, and had the stubbornness and determination to make it work.
So you're finding that's a capital issue in Australia, fundamentally?
Fundamentally, yes.
Yeah. It's an interesting, It's I've experienced that, just seeing the journey, and it's sort of it's been difficult to see hard businesses be backed in Australia, because they want to see, with digital businesses and software-driven businesses, within 3 to 6 months, you actually know where you're at in terms of delivering a positive consumer behaviour, right, or a behaviour for business as well, where that gets backed, right, through a lot of evidence and examples, comparative companies internationally. When it comes to hardware-based, infrastructure that are bringing real capability back, I think we do have a gap and a challenge in Australia to deal with. So, but it's great to see that you've got the grit to make it happen, which I think will prove out great. I wasn't going to say to the end, but on the journey, right?
Yep.
Because I do believe this where you're on at the beginning. So let's shift to thinking about closed loop side of things and the impact on the environment and socially, how the current way our world works, which is take, make and waste products, as we're aware. Over the last few decades, we've actually seen the impact of be driven specifically on price, right? And price has actually created these negative externalities that are around environmental impact. Climate crisis seems to be the thing of the day, and we're sort of driving that. I was watching COP26. I actually got up on the Sunday morning at 5 a.m. I got up early on last Sunday, and what did I do? I was watching YouTube. I'm watching the COP26 final remarks on YouTube in the morning in the lounge room, which my wife started laughing about, but that's another, we won't go there. The challenge that we have is trying to apply closed loop thinking in a place like Australia, where a net importer of products, right, is so challenging, right? So even of more complicated products, at Circulist, we're fundamentally going after trying to reshape the thinking and reimagining how we ultimately deal with the externality of something like e-waste, right? We get great products designed and delivered so complex in terms of their production that ultimately they actually are hard to disassemble, therefore going to e-waste. It's that big wicked problem. How do you see closed loop sort of manufacturing, or the closed loop of circularity in that sense? And how do you think about that sort of medium to long term? Do you think about it now? How does Black Lab think about those challenges that need to be sorted out? Because we actually haven't got, even in that equation, like we spoke about recently, there's some fundamental roadblocks in just people understanding that we need to sort out for recycling and remanufacturing of materials, right, at its core. How do you think about that? Is that part of your philosophy going long term?
It absolutely it is something that I think about. It is something that I will always have a conversation about. The problem that we constantly, that we talk about is we've got this price, quality, time as a triangle. It's about educating people about it now being a square. You know, it's price, quality, time, environment. Now, when you pull in any direction, something else is going to be impacted. You know, one of the problems that you have with closed loop is that the second time you use it, it's not as good as it was the first time you use it. Okay, so you're pulling away from quality. The potential for price, you know, I know that there is issues where we went through a period of time of burying and stockpiling steel because it was more cost effective to go through the process with iron ore than it was actually to recycle the steel because of how cheap it was. You know, with the steel prices increasing at the moment, that will draw the steel out of those stockpiles of recycle and it'll start going through a recycling process, you know. And steel's a great one because if done right, it can maintain the same quality. We can turn out the same thing constantly over and over again. But plastics, you know, there's a problem there. Glass, you know, it's very hard to maintain a crystal clear glass without taking it through a very toxic process to bring it back to what it is. So what's the environmental impact of that as well? So I think that the education side of this is that until people start getting performance managed or we start looking at this from a board level of making that environment part of someone's KPI in what they do on a daily basis with work, people aren't going to start thinking about it when they go to a shelf and they look at the product and they buy it on the shelf and sometimes it's hard to identify between the two of them and they grab the popular brand that they like or they grab, you know, the cheapest one. Frequently, environment isn't sexy either. It's not the sexiest thing on the shelf. So people trying to compete in that closed loop environment need to, I think, try and compete in the other spaces as well if they want to make it a priority. Or we need to force the behaviour through, you know, how you would performance manage it.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about performance management, I hear that, and it reminds me of a book I read about nearly close to 20 years ago. I think I was on a holiday somewhere on the beach, somewhere in the islands. I don't know where I was in Europe, and I think it was actually Lou Gerstner, who was one of the old ex-CEOs of IBM CEO. He was coming in just before IBM was actually going through and possibly even going bankrupt as a company. And he took 18 months because the company was so complex in how it operated. It had a matrixed environment in how they operated with so many different divisions and sectors they were going after. And after 18 months of doing a few trips around the world to understand the business before it was getting ready to go belly up, he recognized that people respect what's inspected of them, right? It's a very simple but powerful term. They basically respect what's inspected of them, right? In typically 9 to 5 salary type of environments. And all they care about, and they might aspirationally actually do have an interest in sort of going forward and tackling some of the hard stuff, but if they're being bonused on their top 3 things for the year, that's all they will basically execute on, right? So it's a bit of human behaviour in that sense, and I agree with you. We need to, there is an aspect of actually getting leaders to lead for tomorrow and sort of applying thinking around KPIs and so forth accordingly, or missions or values. A lot of organisations are applying sort of impact reporting right now and ESG reports, and some people are saying that sort of greenwashing possibly at this stage, sort of where we're at. It's about doing the harder part operationally in an organisation to get them to that point. So, but I'm a really strong believer that consumers, we've got a massive growing community and movement around conscious consumerism and businesses that are looking to apply best practice execution around closed loop and be part of the story every day than actually just, you know, demand it. I think from our perspective, brands are shifting towards that model, but it's taken too long. And our perspective is to try and actually accelerate that movement of the doers doing for tomorrow around environment and impact. And but from that point of view, what are you seeing some of our top leaders and organisations, some of the brands you work with are amazing large organisations in Australia that you're operating with in partnership. How do you see? Do you ever see those type of conversations happening with sort of those executives?
I definitely think like the conversations are definitely happening. I think that they're happening more frequently, and the transition is definitely happening there. And I think that it's a conversation about win-win, win-lose, lose-win. Okay, so if it's a win-win in the right direction, then it's going to be a win-win.
It's like 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Yeah. So if it's a win-lose where like it becomes a much harder sell. If it's a win neutral, so it's like it doesn't change status quo on what their process is, but the environment wins over it. That transaction's gonna be easy. But when there's something that gets sacrificed, like quality, like time, or like the price, directly exposed to the environment side of it, it just hasn't filtered entirely through those organisations, because people don't know how to make that decision and don't know how, or with everything else going on and all of the other stresses. We talk about COVID, we talk about the fact that we've all paused for 2 years as we've gone through this journey. That's what's hard for everybody. But again, capability and total understanding is also important. We might talk about recyclable materials that technically are recyclable, but practically aren't at the moment, from, again, a capital expenditure and how we would look about going about recycling or reusing those materials. The attitude about someone feeling like they're dealing with something that's new and refreshed, as opposed to really quantifying whether or not the old thing needed to be replaced, or whether it's just part of due process. Who wants to take responsibility for saying that thing's still safe? Nobody, when you put the safe term in front of someone, says, actually, no, that is still safe, we don't need to replace it. When you have a safety conversation, someone goes, well, we'll just change it anyway because then we know it's safe. So I think that it is definitely happening. I think that stuff, for instance, when you look at solar, and the massive transition across to it, it's one of those things about win-win. Okay, we've got a transition going across to solar because people are getting financial benefits because they can do a long-term ROI on it. I don't want to go into conversations about how that affects our infrastructure and the other problems that solar causes, but the perception in society is a win-win. Okay, so that's why you're getting acquisition of it. When you're talking about LED lights, low energy use and the transition that happens across to that, it's a win-win in people's minds because it's going to last longer. You're not going to have, be changing light globes as frequently, and it's going to be cheaper to run. Those things, that's why we see transition that happens into it. But the true cyclic nature of automotive bills, like, vehicles, those sorts of stuff, we are seeing resurgence at the moment from supply chain problems of older vehicles. I think that's fantastic. People seeing value in stuff that they didn't, historically see value in, and wanting to buy a vehicle that they're going to know is going to go for 1 million kilometres, not going to go for 100,000 kilometres.
Yeah, I'm going to say something about the solar side of things. I think we're kicking the can down the road for another big problem that's going to be with regards to the solar panels, and they're having those disassembled and recycled to be remade again into other things. And there is some activity going on around sort of trying to deal with that at a federal level. But I think it's going to be a massive issue for us in the next. It's actually known that in the next few years we're going to have a massive issue with first generation panels that have come through that don't have to be taken down and replaced with something else. So that's another conversation for another time to go deeper in. But look, just final thoughts now, just going in. Where do you see Black Lab design, in the next 5 or 10 years? Where are you seeing? I just see, based on what you're looking from my perspective, looking at it at a high level, that there's capability building to be added over time, getting more intelligent, improving operationalization. We have a philosophy that's part of our 5 levels of Circulist advancement that we're sort of rolling out soon once we launch our new site, which will actually talk about how do we start looking at taking away from mega factories and the global supply chain paradigm and reimagining pushing everything back to local cities with micro-service centres enabled city by city globally, right? I mean, what I've seen in what you're doing here, you're very much an integrator and assembly enabler through your fabrication and intelligent componentry to deliver solutions in the market. Imagine if you had a satellite capability city by city around the world by being able to validate this operating model and take it into other markets. Is that sort of party? I mean, I'm throwing something at you, but I can see where you could take Black Lab. So
It definitely is, and what we have created here is a blueprint of something that works, and it's easy to replicate that blueprint of something that works. The hardest thing about what we do on a daily basis, and I will walk anybody through our factory, is and show them the software we use, the equipment that we use. Talk about our core philosophies. But the reality is it's hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything that you feel like you've achieved anything, it was hard in the process. It's what we do isn't hard. It's just that it's constant. It's you think you get over a hump and there's another hump in front of you. The hill gets bigger. Those sorts of things. It's hard work, and because it's hard work, it's rewarding, and we get someone there. Like you go back and you quote guys like Elon Musk, and he talks about you want to be more successful than the next guy, just work twice as many hours. Yep. There's a bit of a school of thought in that work is part of life. It's part of our journey. We don't go to work so that we can go home and go to the beach afterwards. Do more of what you want to do and less of what you don't want to do, so it's more enjoyable, so you can do it for longer, so you can sustain it for longer. There is a point in life where you're going to have to let go of the difficult thing that you've been doing for a long period of time and generated your skill in, because you can't scale that anymore, and you need to let someone else make a mistake going through the same journey and encourage them and take them through that, to realize that you can't run a business without a team of people around you, okay? And so the hardest thing about running Black Lab is not about buying equipment. It's not the capital side of it. It's keeping a team motivated, keeping them enthusiastic. Going through COVID, we did heaps of stuff. We wanted to make people not have to worry about how they were eating every day. So we fed our staff, the whole factory, the whole way through COVID. We had some chefs that weren't able to work in hospitality at the moment, that were coming up and doing very mediocre labor intensive jobs in the factory, and I was like, hang on a second, guys, do you guys want to cater for us? Okay. So we opened it up, and we did breakfast 2 days a week and lunch 3 days a week in the factory, to try and take a stress away from those guys, so that it was one less thing that they needed to worry about. All of this stuff is about people. It's actually not about product. It's about people's decisions about how they're going to buy stuff. It's people's decisions. So what does Black Lab look like in 5 to 20 years? It's lots more people doing lots more exciting stuff.
Bring it on, Daen. So just let's wrap it up with some final thoughts on, if anybody's thinking about challenges they may have, why Black Lab, right? We've got a lot of listeners and growing at the moment. What is it about this sort of story when they hear it's like, why Black Lab? What would you be saying, like, in terms of, come along in partnership on the journey with yourselves? What's the big why? And
I'd say we are incredibly fast learners. And if you've got a problem, come and have a conversation with us, because we'll find a solution.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how big, how small that problem is. We welcome the challenge.
Yep.
Tell me there's something I can't do, and see what happens.
Bring it on. That's right. Okay, well, that's a great way to close. What I wanted to do is actually just thank you for giving us the time to actually have this conversation and seeing the whole experience here that you have at French's Forest. Hope I see more of these locations around the world, actually, starting off with Australia, clearly. But I think that conversation's been great. It really opened up, and I got to hear more about what yourselves are doing, and the opportunity, and trying to solve some of those gaps in Australia's ecosystem right now, which is great to see. So just for our listeners and viewers, if you want to find out more about what Daen's doing here at Black Lab Design, You can check Black Lab Design on Daen's LinkedIn profile. Easy way to get started. Or go to Black Lab Design, and that's the website to find out more. They've got some amazing videos and have been documenting their journey along the way over the years. And they're quite open and transparent around the challenges that exist in going through this process. And I take my hat off to them for doing that as well. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. At Circulist Quest, we're always interested in stories about entrepreneurs, designers, engineers, and scientists who are helping to accelerate the shift to a circular economy. If you know of someone we just have to talk to, or have any questions about the technology we're developing to help product manufacturers close the loop, visit our website at circulist.org or write to us at media@circulist.org.